Hello, and welcome to this week's Spotlight. As you can see, I'm trying something new, turning out the overhead light and just having another light. I'll get better with the lighting as we go along. Okay, again, hello and welcome to this week's Spotlight. This Spotlight, like Spotlights 11 and 12, deal with the unpopular event of planning for end of life. Uh, and actually, this is probably the last one in this group of stuff that I will do for a while. And I hope it doesn't make you uncomfortable, but it is very important information. Um, Believe me, it's not something I like talking about or even discussing, but just like taxes, it's inevitable. But uncomfortable as this spotlight is, it is eye opening and takes away some of the mystique about it. Um, uh, Again, this comes after a conversation with Reverend Phil, and we were talking about, how, the spotlights were going and what we had. And though I had always wanted to interview someone from Brown's, Pastor Phil brought it right around and joined it in and say, hey, you need or you should do this. It features members of the William C. Brown funeral home that are not only colleagues but are friends for decades, even. Um, and though I've been in that uncomfortable or unpleasant position of planning a funeral, I found out how lucky I was to have made prior arrangements. And prior to the departure of a loved one, I found out how lucky I was to have done this, uh, because you will find out during this spotlight that is very important. Um, it provides important information, and I guarantee you it is information that you may not have known or may not have thought about. Um, again, unpleasant as it is, this is information that you or someone in your family or around you may need. So here is the spotlight: funerals, removing the mystery. Okay. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Here is your spotlight for the week. This is spotlight, um, if I'm counting correctly, this is spotlight 16. Um, with us tonight, we have Charmaine Brown and Christopher Brown of the William C. Brown Funeral Homes, uh, and a little history on how this came about. Um, Spotlight 12 was estate planning, um, wills and trusts, which is looking toward, sadly to say, end of life and making sure your loved ones are where they need to be financially. So that was a financial thing. But then Spotlight 11 was the final expense solution, where we talked to a Lincoln Heritage, where they concentrate on insurances to handle end of life payments and arrangements, which then brought us to my conversation with Pastor Phil and brought us to the two people you see in front of you. Like I said, this is Charmaine Brown and Chris Brown of William C. Brown Funeral Home. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Okay, so um, I'll hold off on one of the questions, but let's just dive right in. I've had a relationship with you guys for years, having been at St. Stephen's and now with VLF. So we've known each other for years, and we've had a relationship. But um, let's start with who you guys are. It is a family business, and for the most part, you guys are into the family business. So I guess my question was, as you guys were coming up, were you expected to come into the business, or this was a I don't want to say a goal. How did it happen for you guys being the young people that you were and are?
Right, Charmaine.
So, so I lived in a funeral home for the first from birth up until we got into high school.
Okay.
Um, I've always liked seeing and watching my parents work with families. Before OSHA had major rules and regulations, I was able to help my dad dress bodies, and babies were my main interest to dress babies. This was like back in the 80s. So I've always had a love for helping people and I was one of the weird science kids coming up.
Okay.
So it just kind of grabbed me on that aspect. This was a choice. My parents gave us a choice. However, everyone, like, I guess since the Jewish community can pass things down to their children, a lot of people believe that the African American community should pass things down to their children as well. So I came into it by choice. My father gave me options when I graduated from high school and said, okay, you can go to school for this here. You can also go to school for what you want to go for. And I told him I only wanted to go to school for mortuary science. When we were in high school, I went back to the funeral home and worked after school. I even dressed up at school. I found it fun to dress up at school. This was before the uniform days. So I even dressed up at school, and people knew that after that I was leaving to go to the funeral home.
Right.
So this is just something that's just always been in me. Our grandfather, um, my mother's father, had a funeral home in Philadelphia. So we used to go up there and play around the funeral home there as well. My uncle now runs that funeral home in Philadelphia, Price Funeral Home. So it's always just been a choice. And Mr. Brown, well, my dad, our dad, still say we still have a choice. But Chris and I, regardless, we still show up every day because we love to serve the people.
Okay. All right. Chris?
Well, I think I took the high road. When I grew up with my grandparents. I actually lived with my parents. Unlike Charmaine, she lived in the funeral home. I would come in the summertime, so I would see, the when it was summertime, I would see what was happening in the funeral home, and they used to kind of tease me not tease, but my brother and my sister when I would come, they play jokes on me, and I kind of didn't like it at first. I tell you one instance. Uh, it was so hot. It was a hot summer, and downstairs was cool. And where they said, let's go sleep on the floor downstairs, and that's where they had the funerals. Well, there was it was nobody in there when we went down there. But when I woke up the next day, everybody was gone, and I about zapped out. I had a fit. I ran up the steps because they left me. I didn't know what to do. It wasn't a body in the room, but it was just a fact. They're like, oh man, somebody's gonna wake up. But once I got moved with my parents, like Charmaine said, it wasn't thrown on you. But my father, he would throw a little side stuff like, uh, you don't work, you don't eat. If you don't, we say, what do you say? If you don't eat, if you don't work, something like that. So we got the point, and we pitched in, and it seemed like it was, pretty decent to have Black unity as a family business. And I'm looking at everything that he had and him and my mom built. So I went to the military first. I didn't go right into mortuary science out of high school. I went to college, then I went to the military. Then I came home, went back to mortuary science school, and then that's how we came into getting licensed so we can
Okay.
try to get this thing going.
Okay. So, and you answered most of the questions that, as far as you, but you did touch on a few things that I do want to um, get into. Um, but I will start with is there fulfillment in the work that you do? I know you work with, and we're going to get to a question about relationships with your clients and clergy and et cetera. But Charmaine, you came up in the business, and Chris, you came into it later. And not despite the reason that um, we would come to your business, because it's not a business that, it's not like a store or something, but is there fulfillment for you and what you do? And I guess it's a twofold about building relationships with your clients and clergy. So I guess it's a twofold question, because in your business, you build relationships with your clients, of course, and then we're going to have a question that comes up with that. But you also build it with clergy. I mean, I think not so much our introduction to each other, but our our relationship started with me being the media person for most of the funerals at St. Stephen's for years, and we still carry on that relationship now because of VLF and anything that we can do to help you out, among other stuff. So you can tell us about the relationships that you have with your, let's say, your clients, because I guess in that you get any fulfillment, if any. So I'm not going to say you get fulfillment. I kind of think you do, but tell us about what's fulfilling to you in providing the services for families and your relationships with your clients. And we'll get Charmaine, because Chris is just going to sit there. And
No, well, my fulfillment personally is one, having people watching us grow in this business with our parents. After a while, people will call back and ask for little Chris, realizing, Chris is over 45, but they will still call back and ask for little Chris and little Charmaine.
right.
So that's a fulfillment when people have gained that trust to know that we can continue this journey even though our parents are still living. It's a fulfillment when families come in and tell our parents to sit down because we have it. So you get that fulfillment when you have earned your own trust in the families that your parents have served before. But just on a personal note, just last week I was able to go to a networking event with a bunch of young ladies. One young lady, I funeralized her brother back in 1998 when her and another young lady who was my worthy matron in the Eastern Star were putting this event together for networking. They call it Dining with Bosses. And they were putting together this networking. My name came up, and the young lady, her name is Charmaine as well. She was very excited to see that I was still working in the business. She told my worthy matron Tiara, hey, I know that lady. I remember that lady. She was like 10 years old when I buried her brother, but she remembered the things that I did for her and her mom and how I carried that service back then. I believe the young lady is in her 30s now. And she hugged me and cried, called her mom on FaceTime. Like, that is total fulfillment when families can come years after years after years and still remember the little teeny things that you have done for them. And
Right.
this girl was a child when I assisted her family with her brother. So that's the fulfillment that we get.
Okay. All right. Chris, do you have something before I move? But
It's the same.
What is it familiar? Yeah.
That you can conversate with folks and fulfillment when people, like if I'm sitting with a family and let's just say if it's 20 families I sit with, at least 16 to 17 families will actually say, you made this easier for us. I never thought that I would be laughing at a time like this. Because when I'm sitting with folks, I see them like they're my family, no matter what creed or color. Uh, we understand that they need a service, and we understand that it's not an easy process and they really don't want to be there, but they know that they have to get through that process, and that we can sit there and talk with them, and they're satisfied, and it's just fulfilling to us and fulfilling to me that I really feel like I did my job and not making the people feel like they're stressed, and making them feel like we all are part of a bigger family.
Right. I have to say that in the years, and I mean it's years, probably decades since we've been dealing with each other, that you guys, as we wind down the funeral services, you're talking with the family. I won't say it's unique. It might be unique. Yeah, I would say it's unique to what I have been used to. I have been to a lot of funerals, unfortunately, but maybe a majority of them have been to services that you guys oversee as funeral directors. But I like how you guys are at the end, because it does take away some of that sting for that moment, maybe some of that sting that the family is going through. So that's definitely, and that's where my thoughts of your fulfillment came from, but I had to ask the question and such. So and that's building relationship with the clients. Let's just go out on, I don't know, a different, not a limb so much, but your relationships with clergy. I know your relationship that you've always had with Pastor Gray, and we know the relationship that you have with Pastor Phil. Again, it's throughout decades of interaction. But how are your interactions with other clergy outside of the ones that I know? Wow, Charmaine, that's a face.
I'll do this one.
I always tell Reverend Jackie that she can't hide things in her face. And it's going to play into another question. But how is it dealing with clergy?
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm used to talking with clergy. Sometimes it's not really the clergy. When you're trying to get through to them, you got to sometimes go through different channels just to get to them, and that can be difficult sometimes. And a lot of church, it's different. It's just different. You have your smaller churches where like the pastor kind of knows everybody. And when I mean small, like I'm congregation like 100 or less.
Like us, VLF.
Yeah.
Well, we maybe a little bit over 100, but go ahead.
Yeah, you feel more comfortable with them, because it seems like they don't have a lot on their plate where they have time to tell you what to expect from us, and we can listen to that. But sometimes what we I can't really think of, but what we expect, we always go in like, we're not taking over your church. You tell us how you do things. But there are some things that we do as a funeral home that we have to take care of the family and still have proper protocol. And I always try to find whoever pastor, whoever the person of clergy in charge, and ask them, how do you do things? That's a way to really get their attention, that you're on their side. So that's what I do. I try to find who's in charge and then see how they do things without overstepping any kind of boundaries.
Okay.
And the relationship with the clergy goes pretty good. Now the bigger ones, most of the bigger churches, sometimes they assign another minister to that because they're doing so much, and we understand that. But it's different. I look at clergy different now because you can really see them for who they are, and they're actually comical people. They real down to earth. You think that they're like, oh, the pastor's gonna say this, and no, he or she, they do have a laid back type spirit, and that's what I like to see.
Okay.
I've seen in the almost 30 years of dealing directly with churches. Um, at one time when I first started, you had some preachers that one funeral home bring a check, they boost that particular funeral home to their congregation. Then if the next funeral home bring them a check for $5 more, they start boosting that funeral home to the congregation. Well, our father never got into putting money into preachers' pockets. We were born and raised AME. My father is staunch AME. Our grandfather was an elder, and our aunt and uncle are retired ministers or whatever through the AME church. So the AME church will stick together and support their own. You have other churches that will support you based on how much that check is when you come in their church. So what my father would do is give a love offering to the church, but not to the pastor. That's a difference in putting money in the church's hand versus putting money in the pastor's hand. And then at one time, my dad, if we had a service, especially in the AME church, he would tithe the price of that funeral back to that church.
Wow.
On behalf of the deceased. So, that was his way of giving back, especially in the AME church. That was his way of giving back in the AME church. So you see competition, but my grandmother, Miss Ella, always said, the ones you don't get, you don't need. And the ones you don't need, don't worry about them. So I've always had that mentality because people want to shop around. And if just like, McDonald's or Starbucks, they see things on the menu. If they want it, they get it. If they want you, they'll get you. There's no need to get out here and start competing with different people because we all provide a service. However, most of us provide a more personal service. And when it comes to the ministers and they see that these small funeral homes are giving more attention than the larger ones are, it's starting to shift. It's starting to shift without us having to put money into the preacher's pocket. I balled my face up because we have a lot of personal friends that are ministers. But some of the ones from the bigger churches, in the past, some of the ones from the larger churches were the ones who depended on, how much money you were putting in their pocket. That's what they would support. And that's what I went to. By the time Chris came, it was more on a personal level. It was more of, okay, these are who the family want to use. Let us go ahead and deal with them because the family is in here. Sometimes I had to get real to the side with some of the preachers because between the usher at the door or the deacon, they blocked the relationship with the pastor. And it's not even necessarily a large church. Small churches would do it too. They block the relationship with the pastor. Or, sometimes I have to tell the pastor they get sideways, and I apologize for not being the funeral home of their choice. However, this family chose me to provide a service, and this is what I'm here to do.
Right.
We have to say it to them sometimes. Haven't done it recently because people understand when we come through the door now, we're about our business and about serving our people.
Right. And that is what I've always admired about you guys. That you're always about business. And I have to say that we've always worked well together. It's like, once you guys get in and I know that it's you guys, because sometimes I don't know until I get there, then it's just easy going. We react with each other, help each other and such like that. So that brings me to another question, because unfortunately I have witnessed, and I'm sure you have, and so the question will be to you. I have witnessed that at a time where you think families should be coming together, that you see some, let's be for real about it. We see some ugliness. Whether it's on a pride or that's my daddy thing and he wanted such and such, or if it's a financial thing. We see some ugliness, not financial towards you guys on what do we get on the back end. So, and I have to say, I've been in the vicinity when you guys have met with families, and I've never seen a family conflict, but how do you handle, and I'm sure you guys have sat at the table talking to families, and the conflict has happened right there at the so if it's okay, how do you guys handle family conflicts?
I'll give you 10 minutes and I'll be back. I'm
We
going to
have to
step out.
be, yeah, you have to kind of step out sometimes, but we have to be, what's the guy named Mary Povich? Remember Mary Povich and
Right.
what's the other guy that had the chair thrown at him?
Geraldo.
Geraldo.
Okay.
We have to take the place of Geraldo and Mary Povich sometimes. Like we have to calm the situation down. Sometimes you have to figure out who's in the room. All the time, you have to figure out who's in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Then, when you have some outside people, you have to tell the outside people to step outside. It's getting real tense, and these are the most immediate that we have to listen to. When it comes to a bunch of children, especially when someone have multiple sets of children, and the individual is not married,
Mm-hmm.
we have to are you still there?
Yeah.
I'm
It froze
sorry.
for a little bit,
My
but you're
phone went
good
out.
because your audio
Never went out. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
We have to let the families know that the children are in charge equally. So you have to set the state standard. The state of Maryland set a standard on who the next of kin can be and who the next of kin will be. So you have some parents that when their child get married, they still think they're in charge of their child. So you have to stop the parent and say, okay, I understand your concern and this is your child. However, the state of Maryland says if they're married to this individual, that individual is the legal next of kin. Now, if the wife or the spouse want me to talk to you, then I can address you. But until then, let me deal with the spouse. So it's a way of letting them know, hey, it's not your turn. You know, it's how you do it. We don't get a class in that.
Yeah.
And I can truly say over the years that the Lord has been working on me in my delivery. So I have learned how to deliver that.
Charmaine, I want to add one to it. Believe it or not, Mr. Spence, there is always somebody in every family. If you sit back and watch, they can get everybody to fall in line the way you need them to. And you can find that person in the family. And once you find them, your job is a little more easier because they can get everybody straightened out.
That's true, but it's not a lot of big mamas these days.
They don't have to be Big Mama anymore.
Who doesn't have to be?
Just a person that everybody just listens to. I mean, you see it. You see it, especially when you're like on the funeral itself. Uh, I never forget. We had a service in Galilee, and everybody was like really loud, and they were talking, and this one was Big Mama at the time. She said she was the smallest person in there, but everybody listened to her. She said, "Everybody, shut up! The preacher trying to talk. The preacher trying to let you give some information for you. Y'all shut up. If you don't want to shut up, come see me." And it just threw me for a loop. I was like, man, it was about 40 people in there, and everybody stopped. As soon as she started talking, they listened. They did everything needed to be done.
We need more of them. We
So that's
definitely
when
need
we
more
kick
of them.
into it. Yeah.
Yeah,
We
so
kick into
we
that.
need more of them. So, unfortunately, when when I say we, I mean the us clients, people, customers. When we come to you, um, we're in a more reactive state, not proactive. Um, and I bring up that because of what I was saying later, the final expense solution on planning out that, at least the financial portion, how it applies to after someone passes. And I just recently lost a half brother that was in a nursing facility since the 80s. And honoring my uh, half sister's, or let me just say sister, honoring her wishes, we dealt with a funeral home over on the west side of Baltimore, over in that area. But in knowing how it worked with him being in the facility and money wise and how much he has and how much they wanted, I was proactive in setting up a pre-arrangement with the funeral home of her choice, and it saved me a lot of time and effort when it came down to the end. So I guess the question is, with that being the case, reactive and proactive, what advice would you give to anyone that's looking right now? Not saying that their health is declining, or it's not saying that their wife, spouse, or anybody's health is declining, but and what I'm talking to you now, and some of the two spotlights were before, it is about being proactive for that time when it comes, and we hope that it's years out. But what advice would you give to someone that's looking now, that maybe looking at this and considering it for the first time, maybe I need to be thinking about some things? So what advice would you give to those people?
So
You saw him nodding his head at you, didn't you?
I get it.
You know,
I'm used to it. I get it.
yeah, I got it.
So here's, I'm glad you brought that up. There's a book called Putting My House in Order.
Okay.
We have these, and if people want to stop past one of the locations and pick them up, you don't have to use our funeral home, because I just want to educate you as to getting this together. Inside of this book here, it has where you can put all of your, you probably won't be able to see it, but I'll tell you what's in it. Having all your affairs as far as your bank accounts all in one place, the information for those, insurance policies, if you have insurance. Now, your question can lead in 5 different directions based on the age bracket of individuals, and also based on the health factor of the individuals.
Okay.
And based on if somebody need to go into a facility like your half brother did now, and what the state of Maryland requires you to do. So getting a book like this and putting your house in order and having everything in it in one place where people can find your stuff. Now is the time to stop being secretive. Now is the time to start sharing with your family and let them know what you have. Because what's going to happen, the family's going to come to the funeral home, and then the funeral home going to look bad when we're looking for this paperwork, because we're going to need it. So in order for us to have it, if you put it all in this book or write it all down and let somebody know where your stuff is, even if you want to stay secretive and put it up and just tell somebody you can't open it until I die, you can do that. The biggest thing now that people are going through is placing their loved ones into facilities, putting other names on your deeds and property. That has come up. When you have to put your loved one in a facility, and right now we're personally going through this, when you have to put your loved one in a facility, if that loved one is on that house by itself, the state will force you to sell that house in order for that person to get the additional Medicaid assistance that they would need for either a nursing home, hospice facility, extended hospital stay, or extended care and things like that. So if no one else's name is on your house, please put someone else's name on there, because the state can take it. The state can also start taking your money, and will tell your family to cash in your insurance policy. So if you had an insurance policy for more than 20 years and it's a $20,000 policy, you may have $5,000 to $7,000 in cash value. So what the state is going to see is that you have a cash value in that policy. So it might be $20,000 in the face value, but the cash value, the state to say, hey, you got to cash it in, you get that $5,000, but that $5,000 can only go to a funeral home. It cannot go in your cousin's pocket or nobody else's pocket. It has to go in a funeral home, because the state is very good at going back 5 to 7 years of your financial statements, seeing where your money went. So start putting other people's names, especially when you're at a certain age bracket. Well, not even a certain age bracket anymore, because we've just this past couple of weeks, we've had very young folks that come through with aneurysms.
Right.
And this is kind of instant for them. So make sure someone else's name is on everything that you have. That really makes a difference. Make sure you have beneficiaries listed, because if not, your stuff will go into an estate and the funeral home can't do nothing with it until your family finish fighting over your estate.
And
Then the
tell the
funeral home
beneficiary that they are the beneficiary.
that they are the beneficiary, right? Especially if you have a federal government.
With that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't nobody know who the
People don't
beneficiary
know.
is. Yeah,
Wow.
especially when it's a federal government policy. They really don't know. And it's hard for us to find out. And then we're working with insurance companies that don't want to tell us nothing. So then we got to hold off on planning a funeral until what the insurance company say one time, you have to call us back in between 8 and 15 days for us to tell you who the beneficiary is and how much the policy is worth.
I've heard
So
that.
you gotta wait 8 days in order to tell a family, oh, you do have the money, or no, you don't have the money. And another thing that has come up with people's insurance, contestability. When you take your insurance out, your insurance agent is telling you the truth that you are covered, right? However, most policies you have to live 2 years in order for the insurance to pay out the full face amount. If you don't live that 2 years, they're only going to give the beneficiary back what the premiums are and not necessarily to the funeral home. I've come across just last week a graded policy. The graded policy contestable period was 3 years. They pay out, let's just say they pay out 15, the policy 10,000. Let's say it's 10,000. After the first year, they pay out 1,500. After the second year, they pay out 2,500. However, the individual have to live 3 years in order for them to pay out the whole 10,000.
Wow.
And it's always 3 years in a day, not exactly 3 years. So they have some policies now that are graded policies, and it's normally for people who are seniors and have health conditions, and you paying more in the premiums. So if you find yourself paying at least $300 to $500 a month for an insurance policy, and that person is kind of ill, go to your funeral home and make those payments towards the funeral home. Set up a bill, because if you have a bill, let's say you have a bill of 10,000, you pay that bill off within a 3 to 5 year time frame. The funeral home have to honor that contract when you die, regardless of how long the funeral home had it. If you have insurance, insurance does not lock in the price of your funeral, only cash being paid into that. So if you want to put cash into it, pay it off. We have to honor your contract if you live another 15 or 20 years. It's if, ands, and buts with it, and only if, and but with that is if your casket is discontinued, then your family will purchase a casket of that same value. So if it was 2,000 at the time, you'll find another casket that's 2,000 during that time. But put people's name on everything, your house, your bank accounts, because if you have to go into a facility, the state of Maryland can confiscate it with no questions asked.
Wow. Wow. Chris, I see what you mean. she know her business. and
that's over experience. Like, we're learning every day with these insurance companies.
Right.
That's over time experience. We have some companies, Mutual of Omaha. You make a phone call to them, they'll call the beneficiary, say, hey, do you have a contract with this funeral home? The beneficiary says yes. They'll call back to the funeral home and say, we'll have your check in the mail in 7 days. They don't need no paperwork at all. Mm-hmm. They just confirm it just like that. No proof, no death certificate, no nothing. But then other insurance policies, you got to give them blood. You got to give them the tiger's tooth and everything.
And that's really weird you said that, because we got a thing in from Mutual Omaha today. It must be upstairs on the table. I bought it in the house with me. So, and I didn't know that Mutual Omaha was, I mean, it's been around for years. I know that,
mm-hmm,
I remember that it was Animal Kingdom. That was way before y'all time, because I got 67 years here. But that's I never heard of, I've heard some weird things, but I never heard about that graded.
Yeah.
Yes.
When she said graded, when I was sitting there, I turned around in the chair. I was like, graded? What in the world is that? And when she explained it, and I was like, man, that's messed up.
I guess that's why you wanted her to take the lead anyway. But okay, so that leads into a question, and I didn't know whether it was proper or not, but it sounds like it could be. So, of course, there are the people that think GoFundMe is a policy. Um, um, and it goes into that being proactive. So I'm sure that they come to you because they need you. That much is true. But often, and I say often, and I don't want to say our community, but sometimes it's our community that's unprepared for it. Without going into any specifics or whatever you do, how do you handle those families that probably weren't prepared? Let's put it that way.
You give them options.
Yeah. And
And they
sometimes
work it
you
out.
can refer someone if they just walking in the door and they say we don't have a lot of money, or we just can't we don't have anybody. We're friends with other funeral homes where we'll say at least give them a call and see what they would offer if what we're offering is not feasible enough. We always say, well, we'll give like two people that we kind of know and say at least give them a call. I don't know what they're going to tell you, but at least call them because I know that maybe they might have something for you, help for you.
Okay, well, I can't see that you guys are overcharging at all. So I'm just seeing that there is a community of sorts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because you have relationships with other funeral homes as well. But Charmaine, you were going to was that what you were going to say, or you had something
No,
additional?
you lay out options for them. Most people that come to us, they using us regardless if they have it or not, and they find a way of paying it. The ones that are shopping around, you let them know on the phone, hey, these are our prices according to our general price list. This is what I'm giving you. They will tell you on the phone that you too high, or they will tell you how much another funeral home costs. So
Okay.
then your suggestion is, well, maybe you should call back to that funeral home, or even let's go a step further. Their loved one is already at the other funeral home, so they're calling you to get their loved one out of your funeral home, out of that other funeral home, because they think they're too high, but yet they like our personality, but then they can't afford us. So my answer to that is, let me tell you how to work this out where you are.
Okay.
Because in the end, you're going to have to end up paying two bills. So you might as well stay where you are and work it out. So let me tell you what to tell the funeral director in order to work this out.
That's good.
I don't feast on numbers. We don't feast on burying everybody in town. We feast on helping people. So if we're helping by allowing you to stay there, and I'm trying to tell you how to stay there and how to work it out, that's good for us.
Yeah. And our dad sometimes when folks call on the phone, he's a comedian. So
Yes.
he's always got
He
he
asked me
can
the
tell
same
you some,
question about me being married every time he see me.
yeah,
You still married?
there you go, man. Now I've seen him
And
on
if
the
you talk to
phone.
him, tell him, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Tonight.
Well, I'll tell you this one thing. He says this quite often sometimes when people call and like say if the price is too high for them. He said, well, let me ask you this. Had you ever been up late at night about 12 or 1 o'clock and you see those commercials? The average funeral home is $9,000. He said, well, the last commercial I saw, it went up to 11,000. He said,
It's the
so
insurance company commercial.
yeah, he said, so they're telling people how much the average funeral costs. And it kind of eases the person from them being angry. And they be like, you know what? I did see that. That's his comic relief about telling folks it's okay if you think it's high, but you know that this funeral industry, the prices are going high because the consumer, not the consumer, but the companies that the funeral homes deal with, they're raising their prices.
They're
Some are
raising their
raising
prices.
twice a year, twice in 1 year. And
Let's keep in mind where your final resting place is.
oh my goodness.
Cemeteries cost more than funerals.
Yeah.
If you are, first of all, if you're a veteran, get your discharge paper. Please visit our website, www.williamcbrownfh.com, and there's a tab for you to get your DD 214 if you don't have it. That's a whole nother problem. Then, if you do not own a plot or have not prepaid for a plot, the cheapest cemetery now is Arbutus Memorial Park for single, and they're $69.85. After Arbutus Memorial Park, all the rest of the cemetery, I saw your face, Mr. Spence, absolutely. After that, you're looking at 70, Holly Hill was 77 something, 7,700 and some dollars for one person, one space, one opening and closing, and one concrete line or a concrete box, not even a vault, a concrete box. So your cemeteries cost more than your actual funerals. But in the meantime, there's only one cemetery which they consider at need is King Memorial Park. They have a package of $34.95, I think, and that includes one grave. However, they dig their grave extra deep, and it accommodates two people, and you can either pay now for the second person or just pay for the first person only, and that includes their vault. But they choose the space for you at the cemetery, which is in the new side of the cemetery anyway, and that's at the time of need. But if you go out there, you're going to be about that 5,900. I just recently personally experienced that with a family I had to go to the cemetery with, but these other cemeteries are $6,900 and up. So please, man, please, sir, don't go to the cemetery first. Go to a funeral home, because if you go to the cemetery first, you ain't gonna come to the funeral home. That's your whole policy.
You
of
saw my
10,000.
face. I mean, I actually, when my brother passed years ago, we actually purchased 4 plots. And my mother and brother are resting together in this, and we actually have it where we have a headstone in the middle. So they're in front of the headstone and the other two are behind the headstone. So I guess we have to have, and I remember paying for it, but I don't remember paying for that much.
Well, back in 99, when I come home, 99, we out in Holly Hill, we paid for 6 graves and 6 opening and closings. And stop. We paid for 6 graves and 6 opening and closings. It was $5,600 back then at Holly Hill. Today, at $6,905 for one. I mean, $7,700 for one. We ain't talking about the mausoleum. Mausoleums are $15,000.
That's not what the headstone included.
And you touched on 2 different things with me is that my sister had paid for, my brother's name was Fred. She had paid for him at Woodlawn. And though they knew her, that they, had to see if the opening and closing was paid for, which that's one of the better things she's done, paying for the plot and the opening and the closing. So, and it was done back in the day. So, and I'm sure it was way cheaper than it is now. But you also brought up the veteran stuff, because Fred was a veteran that I didn't know of. Different. They had a different mom, and we shared fathers, but he had a different mom, and I didn't know them coming up, and I had to become his guardian through a whole new spotlight that I could probably do on my own. But he was a veteran. And I found this out the day before the service, maybe. Talking to family members that some of who I didn't know, but I know for a fact that if I had to look for his DD 219,
DD 214.
214. If I look for it, even if we look for it today, we couldn't find it. So I'm glad that you guys provide a link, and I am definitely going to put that in post-production, how to get to your site and to get in touch with you guys, because that is something that maybe everybody does it, but I'm glad that you guys do, because I know that if we were trying to, thank God that she paid, I guess she wanted to keep the family together. That's fine and well. But had that fell through and we had that option, I would have been, I don't know, my time frame to handle getting it. How long does it take to get it? Let me ask you that. I mean, you provide the link. So how long does it take to get it?
When you're living soon, when you're living sooner than when you die.
Okay.
That's what it seems like. When you living, it'll take probably it depends on the era. It depends on the era that you've been in the military, because there's some guys now in their 70s and 80s where their records are out in St. Louis, and St. Louis had a fire some years ago. So it's hard to find those records. So it takes almost a month when the person dies for us to get that confirmation from St. Louis. We have to send a form out to St. Louis to get their verification. But when you're living, it comes a little faster, because oftentimes the vet knows more of his information to go into the death certificate. Whereas when they're deceased, the family don't know nothing. Oh, he went in when he came out of high school and he was born in 52.
Right.
So now we're sitting there with a calculator doing the math. Well, he was born in 52 and he graduated from high school possibly this year. Let's try that year. So you're playing year games with the veterans, and you need to have as much accurate information as possible in order to retrieve that information fast. And let's get something understood. The veterans in the VA do not pay for everything. Let's get that clear. So a lady said it to me yesterday, and I said, oh, I can't wait to get on here and tell it. She said, the VA gonna pay for all my father's stuff. I said, ma'am, the VA will pay for your father's burial as long as you have the DD 214, which is at the cemetery, at the veteran cemetery only, with the DD 214. However, if your father did not keep that insurance policy that he was offered when he first got out, which a lot of them didn't, or if he wasn't in a program now and it's only like 2 years old, where they're giving a lot of these veterans, they're reintroducing life insurance to a lot of these veterans. And that's only been the past 2 to 3 years. If he didn't get a new policy, then if you don't have a regular street policy like Colonial Penn, you have to come out of pocket for it. Now, we'll submit your paperwork, your DD 214 to Garrison Forest or Crownsville. You will have a burial. It comes with a headstone. It also comes with a concrete liner and the opening and closing. And we'll get the flag for you in military honors. Other than that, the veterans don't pay for nothing but the cemetery, the veteran cemetery only. She said, well, I can take him up to Maryland National Cemetery and bury him in a veteran section. You can, when you pay them $8,250 to bury him in the veterans section of the public cemetery.
Wow.
That's just a veteran section of the public cemetery, not the veteran cemetery.
Right.
So you have to be careful with these veterans.
Okay. So seems like you guys going to have to point somebody at this spotlight, because this is a lot of good information. I'll put it out there, and I definitely advertise that it's going out there. But I guess for you guys, you might have to say, hey, going over to VLF Nation and look at this and answer a lot of your questions, so I don't have to do that. Okay, so before we leave that, what is a ballpark of funerals nowadays? And then I guess I should ask about cremations, because I think more now than ever, I think the cremations have, because of cost, probably have became a considered option. So what's the average cost, if it's okay to ask you guys that question? I'm looking at your face.
I think the TV is
I mean, and you can say no comment, but
yeah, it depends on your market.
Is telling it right.
Huh?
I think the TV commercial is telling it right when you say average. Like Charmaine said, it depends on the market. Uh, but I think the TV is right. Like I always say to people now, if you have insurance, get like 20, $30,000 worth of insurance. Doesn't mean you have to spend the whole thing, but you won't be scratching your head trying to figure out what to do. Because it varies. It varies.
And see, they
Even
always
direct
think more
cremation
of the
varies.
funeral than like you guys have just hit me to than the cemeteries. They not even that's not even in their head at the time.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
They're just worried about your fees and such, but they're not worried about this, which
No,
is
there are some people that'll go to the cemetery first and then
No.
come back to us and want us to cut our bill because the cemetery got them.
Mhm.
Instead of
so
coming to
so
us and
so
then
it
asking us
seems
who
like
want to go.
so it seems like they should be coming to you and making pre-arrangements and payments going first, putting it in the queue or the accounts, but after they come
They
to
can prearrange funerals, cemeteries as well.
right that and that's what I was saying. Maybe they should
Yes.
consider that too, because I don't think their concentration is more on the funeralization than it is on putting them down.
Right. Right. So you can pre-plan your cemetery, and most cemeteries won't tell you you can pay um your opening and
Opening and
closing in
closing.
advance. You
Yeah.
can, and tell them Charmaine said you will, because you can. Like some people, oh no, I wasn't offered that, but you can. So you can go back and pay for it. Now, what'll happen when you go to the when you go to the cemetery and choose your space and you start making your payments, it's like a credit card. You have finance charges with it. It's not like the funeral home. The funeral home don't have finance charges with making payments to the funeral home with pre-need.
Mhm.
Um, so let's not get that confused. Funeral homes don't do payment plans once the person passed anymore. That's a no-no. That's not that people are not doing that.
Right.
So for pre-needs, you can make your payment however you like, however often you like, and whatever denomination you like. Some banks require, depending on the bank that the funeral home uses, but most banks require a $500 deposit in order to establish your account.
Okay.
Um, Once you get that, you can send $20 or $50 a month. And the funeral home have to keep track of all of your payments and send you a receipt of your payments and let you know what your balance is once you make those payments. At least we do. Because it's a running track for when state board comes in and audit us, they can see that this person's money is going directly into the escrow accounts. And just like the cemeteries, most cemeteries are owned by corporates,
Right.
company like SCI, a lot of them, and then you'll see some of the cemeteries that say Dignity. So they owned by corporations. So that's why they have finance charges on top of making the payments for your pre-need. But it's still good to do that because you'll end up having it paid. And what Holly Hill did years ago, when we prepaid our burials, our Saturday fees are free. And a lot of people down Shining Star Baptist Church have prearranged spots out there as well. So their Saturday fees are free. So some cemeteries will let you know, okay, at the time of death, certain things are complimentary because you paid it in advance. So you can make payments in advance to both sides.
Okay. And again, that's good information. That's good information.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to step back with this next question, and I'm pressing an hour here. You guys okay?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. So like I said, the Spotlight 14 pastoring after a pandemic was out there. So did COVID change the way you do business in any kind of way? Did COVID impact you guys on the way that you do business, or have COVID changed the way that you do business now? And that might be a broad question, but
Yeah, electronically. I put it that way. Digitally.
yeah.
We had the funeral industry was the most dinosaur industry
Right.
that you ever wanted to be in. And that's because of the privacy and the dignity of services. You weren't recording funerals. Only funerals that were recorded were dignitaries and singers and preachers. Other than that, your average Joe was not recorded. So we had to learn within a 48-hour time frame on how to digitally adjust to make things happen because of COVID. Now you have people doing TikToks of their funerals, and I didn't get that far yet. I
You don't
ain't
need
get
to
that
be
far
that
with
far.
the
But
You
TikTok.
don't need to be
I
that
do
far.
like I do like the option that like the younger folks, they don't like to move around a lot. They don't like, oh, we don't really want to come in there. So you can do your funeral arrangements online, emailing, and also your authorizations. And then just some of them have to be signed by hand, but it eased it up. Excuse me. It eased a little bit where the people didn't always have to feel that pressure they had to come in. The way that the clientele is going now, if you're sitting at a table and showing them a book of caskets, they be like, oh, I don't want to look at that. You pick one. A lot of people do that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
now you can like take a picture of it because they don't need to put their hand on it. They just see a photo like, oh,
Well, that's because they're used to shopping on Amazon, so they're not putting their hand on it anyway.
That's true. That's true. And matter of fact, I've heard, and I haven't actually looked at Amazon, but I heard that you can buy the caskets off of Amazon now.
Well, maybe
you can,
Costco and other different links. If you Google a color casket that you want, and it
but
comes
be
up on how
careful.
to purchase it, you ain't gonna fit it though.
Be careful. Because bronze doesn't mean the weighted bronze is the color.
It's the color, right? So when you get into what Chris is talking about, people have ordered bronze caskets.
Yeah.
There's different materials of caskets in this industry. You
Right.
have your standard steels, which are in different gauges. The lower the number, the thicker the metal of the casket, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Then you have stainless steel, which are like your kitchen sinks.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have coppers, which are like your pennies, and your bronze are more in the lines of your statues. Well, people come and say, well, I brought a bronze casket from the cemetery. Okay, fool us. It comes in. We can't deny a casket coming offline or from the cemetery. Come in. We waiting to pick up a heavy casket. But what happened? The casket flies up because it's light, right?
Bronze is the color.
Bronze is the color, not the material. And the cemeteries are selling it high because that's what they have, bronze.
Right.
Or you have some woods. We're used to regular traditional woods that are made out of actual trees. Well, you have some woods that are veneers.
Veneer.
So it's like your contact paper over top of some plywood versus a real tree. And they say, oh, I brought a mahogany. When the man pulled it off the truck too easy, that ain't a mahogany.
Paper mache.
Wow.
Paper mache.
Wow. You know what?
That you're
This information alone is going to make sure that people watch this.
Yeah, and we had them folks
mindful.
sign. You come here when they come off the truck. You sign for it.
Right. You
And
sign
we'll
for it.
watch.
And that's a good thing. And that's a good thing. Wow.
Yeah, we can't deny it. And
Right.
we have them come because we don't know what they ordered. We even had a pink one that was too pink. It was like a hot pink. And the lady said, I didn't order that. It's supposed to be a baby pink. Ma'am, this is what came in here. But you
Did she end up using it?
Yeah, she had to because she couldn't send it back faster than when she got it. So I suggested getting some flowers to kind of kill the pink. That's all you can do is just kind of tame this down a little bit.
And then
Get
after it
flowers
comes
to put
down,
on
it
it.
just, wow.
Yeah, this is all one color. But two, those caskets are cut small. So if you are fluffy, healthy, or even bulky, those caskets are cut small.
Fluffy. I like the fluffy. Okay.
They're only like 22 inches wide, and the average
Right.
person is 24.
Okay.
So you have to be
Across
mindful
the
of the
shoulders,
size.
you mean? Okay.
Elbow to elbow, across
Okay.
the shoulders.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I know that we're installing cameras in some homes now, so that if the church has a website that we can go to. So I know that's been some changes that have taken place in some industries, and it's a shame that sometimes I'm at funerals paying attention to their multimedia, and or I'm at a funeral home like I can help you out here, bro. But yeah, COVID did change a lot of things and the churches. So, and I know that COVID forced a lot of technology to be utilized. And you know, if you look at the pastoring at the pandemic, you'll see those pastors talk about things that, you know, are very real things. They're very real
But
things.
it's unfortunate that people still use COVID as a thing,
Mean,
as an
okay,
excuse,
explain it. Go ahead.
as an excuse.
Okay.
I sit around my colleagues throughout the country several times a year at different conferences.
Mm-hmm.
And COVID has really taken away the personal touch face to face with people.
I can say
You
that.
have different generations doing different things. So we have a software where we can send a link to the family for them to start putting in the information that we need for the death certificate. And as Chris said, we have in that same software, we can send them over documentations for them to sign, contract, price list, the whole nine, right? However, it still stopped you from sitting face to face with that family, having that getting that personal vibe and personal relationship with that family. It's just like texting. You can misunderstand a whole lot in a text. I can tell you the cat ran across the street, but you don't know if I'm mad that the cat ran across the street through text or if I'm happy that the cat ran across the street. So it's best that I tell you face to face that the cat ran across the street so you can see my expression about it. So it has really taken away the personal touch of dealing with people. People will sit on your website. Lady called today about pricing. She's on the website. She said, am I talking to the girl that's holding the helmet? So who's the dark skinned one on the other side? Like she's looking at the website, questioning me about things about the funeral home. So I'm like, okay, lady, you know, digitally, people are now looking at websites for stuff. So some funeral homes didn't have websites at all. And they had to instantly jump into a website.
Right.
We played around with Zoom and Facebook. We still use Facebook as our means of streaming the services. But I let the families know, hey, if we're going to church, let the church stream and we can share the link on our website and the time slot of the funeral to the churches streaming, because churches have really they really did it because they didn't know they were ever going to get back into a church.
Exactly.
Other than a funeral. So the church's streaming has been a lot better than any funeral home iPad. And the funeral homes kind of stuck with the iPads because you had to now, instead of having drivers, you got to find a driver that's able to maintain the electronic equipment. Then you got to hope when you go out to a church that somebody don't leave an iPad. Or we even had a situation when a lady was coming out of the pew, her tail bumped the iPad and it went over and crashed. So now you have damaged goods when you want a funeral in the middle of a service. So funeral homes don't want to take a whole bunch out on a funeral, and then they have to have one person just to man the electronic equipment.
Right.
So it has really shifted, but some of our colleagues have still used COVID as a thing instead of getting back to the personal touch, what this business should be about.
Understood. Okay, so you guys have two locations, one in Aberdeen and one in the city. 2.5. Oh yeah, I heard a 2.5. Okay. So 2.5 locations. And you guys have, and I know personally because I'm working with you guys sometimes and some things if we get some things done, but we'll leave it at that. But so
Chris.
you guys always you guys are looking to, like you say, to improve that personal touch and to service your people when they need your services. Of course, like I say, it's not like, you know, McDonald's or anything. But what's next for William C. Brown Funeral Homes?
What's next? The sky's the limit. There you go, Chris. That's a good one.
It just comes about. It just hit us in the top of the head. All of us, each individual one of us, we just break. My father at 1 o'clock in the morning. Hey,
he will text you.
You got to do this tomorrow. Do this. See about this. See about that. And then we just don't even respond about 7 in the morning. Did you get my text?
Yeah.
Now you know
it's
you put
never
that on the ad just in case he sees this. He right. I know you saw my text because I saw you talk about it.
Yeah. Like it's never ending. This business is never ending.
Yeah.
We shift for the people. We shift for our clientele, and we have an ongoing clientele. We can tell who's new. When we haven't heard names before, we'll ask them, well, have we serviced your family before, or have you attended one of our services? And people will tell you when they call, oh, cousin so-and-so used you 2 months ago. Man, a day. I said, did we service you before? No, I was just at the funeral Saturday. Well, good. You know, you have that type of conversation with people. So every day we are growing in the business. We started in the back history of the funeral home. We started out my parents started out with one building on West North Avenue, which was just 1206. That was our old closed down funeral home, which used to be Halstead Funeral Home. He got in there April of 75. And my mother said when they got in there, the roaches didn't even want to live in there. That's how bad the place was. So he went from that one facility to now 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 to 5 buildings on West North Avenue. And it's a garage that covers 4 of the 5 buildings, where we expanded. At first, we had our cars in there until Mr. Brown purchased other garages just to hold our cars. But now we work in there as far as dressing and casketing and things like that, and refrigerator unit inside of that facility. Then we've been there 47 years. Then we went to Aberdeen in 1999, which the Aberdeen was an old Wendy's. My father's friends.
That's where Daddy originally started the funeral industry.
Yes, he started in Havre Grace. He worked for a Bullock Funeral Home that was in Havre Grace, Maryland. And he served as Mr. Bullock's apprentice, driving his dump trucks, air falls trucks. Mr. Brown was an orderly in the hospital. Like I told him he used to write this stuff down because he did a whole lot as an apprentice before he really got into the business. So he went to Aberdeen, and we've been in Aberdeen for 26 years. So this new facility, we've had property to build a new funeral home on, and it just never worked. But you know how they say some things are just God's plan for you to move and not do what you think you want to do, and do what God has planned for you. Right. So we've had property where we were trying to build, and we went from a $3.5 million project. This was 22 years ago. A $3.5 million project. Then we had to bump it down to like 2.7. Then we bumped it down to 1.9. Then we bumped it down to nothing. Just putting cars in the garage. Right. So we finally ended up with a Jehovah's Witness hall. We looked at several properties, Jehovah's Witness and existing churches, so we wouldn't have to build. So we looked around for several properties. Chris and Mr. Brown did not care what side of town it was on. They didn't care. They were just looking. We even looked on the east side of town at a church, and it just wasn't feasible for us to step into that type of project. So Mr. Brown had relatives that are Jehovah's Witness, and then some of his closest friends have people in the Jehovah's Witness community as well. So they gave us a list of buildings that were up for sale because the Jehovah's Witness as a whole are merging. So we ended up, this was the third one, this location we had at 4002 Ridgewood Avenue. Okay. It's a double facility. So they had 2, they called them auditoriums. We call them chapels. They had 2 auditoriums where they still had several congregations operating out of both sides. So that is, it's called Brown's Chapel. It's not the funeral home. It's just Brown's Chapel. So how we do that, William Brown Funeral Home at 1206 West North Avenue rents Brown's Chapel when we need it for funerals and viewings, just like we were to rent any local church when we need extra room. Okay. So we're not having any more funerals per se at North Avenue. Our main office is North Avenue. We're making arrangements, but the chapel space, and we're renting that chapel space. And on the flip side of that, you can also Google Brown's Chapel. We have pictures of that facility now, where it shows the chapel size that seat about 150 something. The main chapel seat about 152, 155. And there's a second side that's smaller. It will seat about 116 if we set it up as a chapel, but oftentimes we use it as a repast hall. Okay. And it'll seat 90 for the repast hall. Okay.
It shows a photo of a repast setup.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if you Google Brown's Chapel, that's our third building, not the third funeral home.
Right. Okay.
There's different paperwork you have to do to establish a funeral home.
Okay.
So it's just the chapel only. So now we're looking into, okay, now how can we perfect this building that we're in? We've been there, it'll be 2 years in May. It'll be 2 years in May that we went to closing. And we're looking to how to perfect that and how to expand that. As far as the flooring and things like that, we cosmetically worked on it and to make it an eye appeal. But now come next year to the next year or two, we still want to do some major stuff inside
Okay.
to it. So we just wanted to get in there first and get a feel for it and things like that. But it's been a blessing because that project by itself costs 1% of what a new project would have been. And you have to come and see it. You have to look online. The furniture that you see online came with the building.
Wow.
Like the chairs in the sanctuary came with the building. The TVs in the sanctuary came with the building. All the equipment came with the building. We just walked in, painted, and cleaned everything up.
Wow.
So that was a blessing to be able to walk in paying 1% of all of the other projects we had in mind.
Wow. See?
So we're making that work.
Well, I like I say, I've known you guys for years. I've known your affiliation and your I don't know, I guess I can say relationship with God, but whenever you put in God first, good things will happen. So good things will happen. So I have to admit, I was saying, like, am I going to have enough questions? Is this going to be interesting? This was real interesting. And it does go with some of the spotlights that we've had before. So I appreciate you guys for coming on.
We appreciate the offer.
You know, I've had fun with you guys on a situation like this. And I'm glad you came back to that, Charmaine. I have a trust. I have a trust to do some things, but this putting my house in order seems to be a start for what you're doing, and that's at both locations, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right, and they can just walk in and talk and pick that up and
Yeah, sure. But if they want to discuss pricing, they have to discuss it with a licensed director.
right. Okay,
But they're more than welcome to come in and grab this book, even if they, use other funeral homes. It's the fact is just getting this information
and
and having
that's
it
the
and being
thing
educated
because
with it.
I know for some funeral homes and such, if you're not dealing with them, they don't want to really talk to you. But again, y'all are cut from a different cloth.
Right.
That daddy of yours. So, so in closing, do you guys want to say anything that we have in closing before we end this for tonight? Anything?
Well,
Get your houses in order.
thanks for having us and giving us the opportunity to have this type of discussion.
Well,
You
not a
don't.
problem. We're linked at the hips anyway, so
Yeah.
ending this tonight doesn't end anything with us because anything can happen. And
Yeah.
everything can happen. So that's good. So we're gonna end this for tonight. You guys are amazing. You guys are amazing.
Thank you so
And
much, Mr. Spence.
I had more fun than I thought I was gonna have. Had fun on a conversation that would make some people cry. But yeah, it was a good thing. So
Yes.
you want to say bye to your audience and
Right.
all right. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank
Good night.
you.
All right.
So that has been the Spotlight Funerals Removing the Mystery. I'd like to personally thank Charmaine Brown and Chris Brown for coming on. I certainly did not think about and realize. I know the cost of funerals, like anything else, has gone up, but the cost and that one thing of not even considering the cemeteries. Charmaine talked about that some people started the cemetery and worked their way backwards. It was never that way with me, but thank goodness that goes back to the passing of my youngest brother that we made plans on at the cemetery where we applied for and paid for our plots ahead of time. Excuse me, ahead of time. Let me get some water. And I do have to check my arrangements with them because I don't remember whether opening or closing was in it. But if it is not, I'm going to enter into negotiations with the cemetery to pay for that. It's not something I like to talk about. Being at the age I am now and where I am in life and the people that I know and love, I don't want to go anywhere. I mean, you know, I have grandkids that I want to see grow up, and I'm thinking that I'll have a few more grandkids. But I don't want to leave the people I love, not my wife, not my kids, or nor my grandkids. But I'm hoping that you have learned some information, that you will start to seek out more information as it applies to you, because with all the information that you've heard, it does change depending on who you are and what you want to do and who you're dealing with, and funeral homes and cemeteries as well. But again, in our effort to, excuse me, got the hiccups, in our effort to bring you information that you can use, we'll try to kind of, this will be the last of that group, but I urge you as you move forward in life to look at the spotlights on trust, wills, planning your estate, and the option of paying for your funeral expenses up front, whether you do it with an insurance company like Lincoln Heritage or do it directly with funeral homes like Brown's. Definitely some of the things that they have as being, you know, a small mid-sized funeral home. And that was one of the questions that I didn't get into, though we touched on it, relationships with other funeral homes. But the things that W.C. Brown Funeral Homes, not to be confused with Joseph Brown Funeral Home over on Monroe. But the things that they have provided, those links are very useful links. And the book that Charmaine showed you, Putting My House in Order, I urge you, if you're near one of their locations, to go in and get that book. Talk to them if you have a need to, or you want to, but pick that up and let that be your guideline as you move forward. So again, Spotlights Funerals, Removing the Mystery. I thank you again for tuning in, and like I always say, see you on Sunday.